What's up, you freaking geniuses? So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to convert from decimal notation to scientific notation. Okay, and I'm also going to teach you a couple different ways you can figure out if your exponent should be positive or negative, which is really important when we're talking about scientific notation. So first of all, the way you write your answers in scientific notation is going to be in this form. So it's going to be some number times 10 to some exponent, which we'll just label e, okay? And like I said, the really important part with scientific notation is figuring out if your exponent right here is positive or negative, okay? And I have a couple rules right here that should help you figure that out. Okay, so with that in mind, let's jump into this first example. So this problem says write 4,000 in scientific notation. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is figure out what your number is, okay? The way you do that is just write down all your numbers that are not zero, okay? So in this case, it's just this 4 right here, right? So we're going to write down a 4. And then again, it's going to be times 10 to some exponent, right? So times 10 to some exponent. Now, how do you figure out what your exponent or your power is up here? Well, that's where these helpful little tips come in. So this first tip has to do with moving the decimal. So if you move your decimal to the right, your exponent is going to be positive, okay? But if you move it to the left, your exponent is going to be negative, okay? So what do I mean by that? So again, going back to your number up here, right, 4,000. All you have to do is write a decimal after your first number that's not a 0. Okay, so 4, that's not a 0, right? So we're going to write a decimal next to it. Okay, and then all you're going to do is move it to the very end. Okay, or another way you could think about it is we're going to move this decimal to where the existing one is, right? So the existing decimal on the number 4,000 is at the very end, right? So that's why we're going to move it to the very end. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. And then that's where it goes, right? So we moved our decimal 3 times. So that means the exponent that we're going to have right here is 3, okay? But again, the important part is figuring out if it's positive or negative. So again, going back to this rule, if you moved your decimal to the right, your exponent is positive. If you moved it to the left, it's negative. So as you can tell, we moved it to the right. So we took our decimal and moved it to the right, 3 times. So that means our exponent should be positive here. Okay, so now let's go to the next example, and then I think you're going to start seeing the pattern with these. So this one says write 4,200 in scientific notation. Okay, so again, the first thing you want to do is write down all your numbers that are not zeros. So here we have a 4 and a 2, right? So 4, 2. Okay, and then the next thing you want to do is write a decimal after the very first number. Okay, so essentially we can put it right here, right? So between the 4 and 2. So if we put it between the 4 and 2 here, we can also put a decimal right there between this 4 and 2. Okay, and then remember, this is going to be times 10 to some power, right? And then the way you figure out what your power is you just take your decimal right here and move it to the very end. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. So 3 times again, right? And then the only thing we have to figure out is if this exponent right here should be positive or negative. And in this case, it should be positive again, right? Because we moved our decimal to the right. Okay, so 4,200 written in scientific notation is 4.2 times 10 to the 3rd power, okay? Now, let's go to this next one. So it says write 69,500 in scientific notation. So again, you want to write down all your numbers that are not zeros. So 695, right? 6, 9, 5, okay? Now the second thing you want to do is write a decimal after the very first number here. So it'd be right there. And since we're putting a decimal right here between the 6 and the 9, you also put one right there between the 6 and the 9, okay? And then, again, this is going to be times 10 to some exponent, right? And then the way you figure out what your exponent here is you just grab your decimal right here and move it to the very end. Okay, so we're going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, so since we moved our decimal 4 times, our exponent would be a 4. Okay, and we moved our decimal to the right, so again, your exponent should be positive. Okay, one more down here at the bottom. So this one says write 1,007,000 in scientific notation. So again, you want to write down all your numbers that are not zeros. But really, more specifically, I should say you want to write down all your numbers that are not trailing zeros. So right here, the numbers we're going to write down are 1007, okay? 1007, okay? I can't just write down 17, okay? Because that would mess up the place values, right? Because the 7, as you can see, is not next to the 1. We have a couple zeros right here, so that's why I need to include them. But these trailing zeros right here at the end, we don't need those. And then again, the second step is writing down your decimal after the very first number. So it'd be right there, okay? And then since we're putting it between this 1 and 0 right here, we'll also put 1 right there. Okay, and then in your answer, this is going to be times 10 to some exponent, right? So again, to figure out the exponent, you just grab your decimal and move it to the very end. So we're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Okay, so since we moved 6 times, our exponent is a 6. Okay, and we moved our decimal to the right, so that means our exponent should be positive. Okay, now let's just do a few more examples with some small numbers. Okay, so this one says write 0.004 in scientific notation. Okay, so again, the first thing you want to do is write down all your numbers that are not zeros. So that would be this 4 right here, right? And then again, the second step is just writing your decimal point after the first number. So we can put a decimal point right there, okay? And since we put a decimal point right here after the 4, we can also put one right there after the 4. So now, again, this is going to be times 10 to some exponent, okay? Now, in this case, you're going to take your exponent, and this time we're going to move it to the left, okay? Because you want to move it to where this existing one is, or where the current one is, okay? So take the one you just drew in, and then we're going to move it to there, okay? So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, okay? So we have a 3 right here. Now, is your exponent going to be positive or negative? Well, we just moved our decimal to the left, so that means our exponent should be negative, right? So then your answer right here, well, you don't want to just leave your decimal right here, so we're going to put a 0. Okay, so 4.0 times 10 to the negative 3 would be your answer. Or 4.0 is also the same thing as just 4, right? So you could also write this as 4 times 10 to the negative 3. Okay, either of these answers right here would be appropriate. Okay, let's go to this next example. So here, this one says write 0.042 in scientific notation. Okay, so again, step 1, write down all your numbers that are not zeros. So 4 and 2, right? 4, 2. And then the second step is writing a decimal after the very first number here. So it'd go right there, right? So if you put a decimal right here between 4 and 2, you're also going to put one right there between 4 and 2, okay? And then again, this is times 10 to some exponent, okay? So the way you figure out the exponent is just taking your decimal right here and moving it to where this existing one is, right? So take your decimal and we're going to move it 2 times, okay? We moved it 2 times. And then is this going to be positive or negative? Well, we moved our decimal to the left, so it should be negative. So then your answer right here would be 4.2 times 10 to the negative 2, okay? Now, going to the next one. So this one says write 0.00769 in scientific notation. So again, step 1, write down your numbers that are not zeros. So 7, 6, 9, okay? And then step 2, write your decimal after the very first number here. So it's going to go right there, right after the 7. So since we have our decimal between the 7 and the 6 right here, you can also write one right there between the 7 and the 6, okay? And then this is going to be times 10 to an exponent. And then the exponent, well, we can figure that out, right? Let's take our decimal and move it to where this current one is. So we're going to move it 1, 2, 3 times, all right? So we're going to have a 3 right there. And since we moved to the left, again, that means our exponent right here is negative, okay? So then your answer would be 7.69 times 10 to the negative 3. All right, let's do one last one. So here, this one says write 0.0004083 in scientific notation. Okay, so again, the first step is writing down all your numbers that are not zeros. But in this case, we're actually going to include one of the zeros, right? Because there's a 0 right here between the 4 and the 8 and 3 right there, right? So we're actually going to write 4083, right? Because I can't just write 483 because now I'm messing up the place value, right? That's not what you want to do. So again, if there's ever a 0 between your other numbers, make sure you include it, okay? Now, the second step is just going to be writing a decimal after your very first number here. So it's going to go after the 4, right? So since we have a decimal between the 4 and the 0 right here, you're also going to put one right there between the 4 and the 0. Okay? And then again, this is times 10 to an exponent. Now the exponent, let's figure that out. So take your decimal and move it to where the existing one is. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times. We moved 4 times, right? And since we moved to the left, our exponent is negative. Okay, so your answer right here would be 4.083 times 10 to the negative 4. So if you found the video helpful, definitely leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any other questions or want to see any other examples, just let me know in the comment section below. Also, there's a couple playlists attached that I think you'll find helpful, so definitely check those out, and I'll see you there.